Hi, my name is Adam Kunzmiller, and I'm here with BGG TV at Gen Con 2014, and I'm joined by Roberto Di Maio.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about the Battle of the Five Armies, a game in the War of the Ring board game line. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people very interested to hear what's going on here. So why don't you start and tell us what's going on with this game?
Okay, so the game is based on final battle at the end of the Hobbit. So when we decided that we wanted to do a game based on the Hobbit, and considering that with War of the Ring we have a license which allows us to exploit, say, the strategical aspects of Tolkien's world, we tried to figure out what was the best option. In the end, we decided to focus on the battle itself because it's such an important moment of the novel.
Okay.
And there are so many elements in the battle, from all the different type of armies, so dwarves, elves, men, the orcs, the wolves, bats, great eagles, incredible characters. So there are so many elements that even if it's just a single battle, there are so many opportunities to investigate, so to make the battle develop in different ways.
It's a bit more zoomed in than War of the Ring was.
Yes, definitely we are closing up in, and while the game will remain familiar with, for everybody who's played War of the Ring before, because we are using the same action dice mechanic that we have in War of the Ring, even if in this case the dice have a different meanings, so the symbols themselves will be familiar to War of the Ring players, so the characters, the master, the army symbol, the Will of the West, but their meaning changes in subtle ways in this game, suitable to the more tactical functioning of the game. And just like in War of the Ring, we also have an event card mechanic, so with dual event cards which are based on action system or the combat parts. But we also have different kind of event decks, so the story deck for the free people player, which features specific events which are only linked to the free people situation, and the story deck for the shadow player. So while this deck remains dual use, the story deck for both the free people player and the shadow player are just single use. Just like in War of the Ring, you can use your actions to do standard type of things, like moving your armies, attacking your armies, moving with your characters. You can also use the actions to activate event cards for enhanced effects in a way, and story-related effect. On top of this kind of decks, we also have another deck which is linked to the fate mechanic. In this game we have the concept of the fate track. The fate track is a sort of a timer in a way of the game, which gives a length of 15 ticks before the game ends and the free people player wins. So if the shadow player doesn't manage to win the game before the fate reaches 15, it's a victory for the free people player. The fate track also determines when certain important characters for the battle, Bilbo, Thorin, the Eagles, Bjorn, comes into the battle. And fate also determines the arrival of fate cards, which are related to three of the characters arriving later in the game, so Thorin, the Eagles, and Bjorn. Essentially, fate cards are enhancement to these characters. So in some games, depending on which fate cards come up, you can have Thorin being very, very powerful and fully able to take on with his sortie from the front gate and be able to attack Bolg. In another game, he might not be so strong and might be forced to stay in the front gate just to keep it. So there's depending on what's the outcome on the draw of the fate cards, can create a very different situation for the main characters in the game. Both the advancement of the fate track and the draw of fate cards is linked to the fate tokens. Fate tokens look a little bit like the hunt tiles in War of the Ring, but their function is quite different. Here what happens is that the fate tokens will indicate whether a fate card is drawn or not, and we'll also tell you how many steps
On the
Fate
track.
progresses on the track. The important thing is that the draw of Fate tokens is not entirely random, of course, but it's linked to a choice made by the free people player at the beginning of his turn. The free people player has a lot of cool characters. Just to begin with, it starts with Bard in the game, with Dane, with Thranduil, and with Gandalf. So these are all characters that he has since the beginning of the game. Later on, thanks to the Fate track, he will get Bilbo, Thorin, the Lord of the Eagles, and Bjorn as well. And so you will also get all the other characters for that. But there is an important choice that the free people player must make, because each of these characters has some specific ability. We call them their abilities as generals. So each character can help a free people player in different ways. Gandalf is able to throw a magic blast through the battle. Actually, this is something that in the story is not explicit, but at the end of the battle there is this scene with Gandalf on the hillock and says that Gandalf looked like he was concentrating and thinking whether to cast a final blast of magic. So he definitely seems to be been capable of doing that. And we have actually a mechanic for concentration of Gandalf, so you can concentrate for one turn more and throw a more powerful blast. And Thranduil can direct the archers on the board to do a very powerful ranged attack, which is also assessed by the range ruler. Dane and Bard have powers which may look less fancy, but it's very important because essentially they have a power to rally and put more troops on the battlefield. But you cannot use all these powers freely. At the beginning of your turn, you must choose how many of these characters you activate as generals, and depending on how many characters you activate as generals, you have multiple draws for the shadow player on the Fate tokens.
All right, we'll just start up when he finishes the announcement.
Okay.
You never know how the cards are going to fall.
Okay, so the shadow player is a little push your luck mechanic in the sense that, let's say that free people player decided to activate 3 different characters. So the shadow player draws 1 token and looks at it. If he wants, he may keep it, or he may redraw and can continue to redraw as many times as the number of free people's characters that have been activated. So True Fate is pretty bad. Second draw is a 1. A 1 is essentially the best token that the shadow can draw, except the special tokens that he can put in the bag. So he would keep the 1 and stop drawing. Of course, it may happen that you continue drawing and you end up drawing a worse tokens that you begin. So it's, also for the shadow player, there's a little bit of choice in the way that the tokens are drawn. Then at this point, you advance the Fate token on the track, and depending where the token is, you can have 1 or more of the characters activated, so they can also enter the game. So this is all new mechanics which are not not like anything which is included in War of the Ring, but which are very important to keep the feeling of the battle. Also because the Battle of Five Armies is very strongly influenced by the arrival of these characters. So when Thorin tries to do the sortie out of the front gate, when the Eagles arrive to the rescue, when Bjorn arrives on the field of battle and with a final assault manages to slay Bolg. So this is all very important, and the Fate mechanic is actually one of the main mechanism that makes this game quite unique, because managing properly the Fate track is very important for the shadow player, because of course the shadow forces are overwhelming, as they usually are, but in the end, if these characters enter the game fast enough, or worst of all, Fate reaches the end before the battle can be won, it's very tough. The shadow player essentially wins by conquering the battlefield. There are two different types of locations on the battlefield which are relevant from a victory point purpose, which are the fortifications, the Eastern Spur, Raven Hill, and the Front Gate, and other settlements like Camp, where the main encampment for dwarves and men is, the ruins of Dale, Fallen Bridge, the lower slopes. So all these normal locations are worth 2 points, while the fortifications are worth 4 points. The shadow player wins by a total of 10 points. 10 points means that, for example, he could win by seizing Spur, Front Gate, and Camp. That would be enough to win. Not so easy as it may seem. The free people player wins either by getting the fate track to 15 before the shadow player can win, or by killing Bolg. The shadow doesn't have so many characters as the free peoples have. On the other hand, they have quite a lot more troops, so they have their own toys to play with. But Bolg is possibly the most single character, most powerful single character in the game, matched by Beorn depending on which fate cards we may draw for Beorn. He's very powerful. He's a powerful bodyguard which allows the army with Bolg to resist an incredible amount of damage. But if you lose Bolg, you've lost the game as well. So you must be careful, because it is your most powerful weapon as the shadow player.
I'm sure that creates some really tense moments
Yes,
when you start relying on him a little bit more than maybe you should.
Yes, because at one time, for example, you may be, say, launching a final assault against the Front Gate with Bolg at the front, and okay, you win the gate, you win the game, but you risk a little bit too much, you lose that final round of battle, you lose Bolg, you lose the game. So it's very tense. There are a lot of these kind of situations in the game where it's really on the outcome of one combat, the battle can be won or lost. The other important elements in the game, just like in the story, are the goblins. Goblins are trying to go through the mountain while the bulk of the shadow army attacks in the valley. And this is represented by the goblins that are amassed in the mountain boxes. Once the mountain box is full, then the mountain pass opens, and they now have access to the board. So this is also somehow non-deterministic, because in some battle you can have the goblins amass really fast. Essentially they are mastered by the arrival of an action die with the high result. So sometimes they arrive really fast and they can have a very important presence in the battle. Sometimes they are slower and they come so late.
Too little, too late kind of thing, yeah.
So you cannot really rely on those. And other important elements which come from the novel are the bats. The bats in the novel, we see them featured because the cloud of bats which accompanies the shadow army, and that helps the shadow army to move, essentially, because the goblins, the orcs dislike direct sunlight, so the bats help them. And also we see them in the battle because they cling to the wounded and say make life difficult for the free people fighters, harass them during combat. Both these functions are represented in the game by the two abilities that you have with the great bats, which are the bat cloud ability, which allows you to use the bats to move the shadow troops also on a roll of a master die. So essentially almost any roll of the action die would enable you to move troops, so that enables you to move and attack really, really fast. And the vampire-like ability, which is a combat ability, which allows you to add damage if you have been able to inflict the damage already to the opponent. The eagles, on the other hand, also have a support function for the free people player in a similar way to what the bats do. So we have the Lord of the Eagles, which when he comes in, the eagles are also enter the game. And the eagles essentially are mastered in the eagle's eyrie, which is that box in the corner of the board. And with the power of the special ability of the Lord of the Eagles, you can get them out on the board and attacking essentially anywhere on the board the Shadow Army. So each individual eagle attack is not so strong, but the fact that they fly all over and they can combine their attack with what your ground troops do can make them very, very effective, and their presence very, very important. Last things that I think it's worth mentioning is in the combat system. This is also another area which has been extended a lot since the mechanic that we used in War of the Ring. Essentially, what we got here is that we got special cards which represent the abilities of each individual troop type. And we have them both for the shadow player and for the free people player as well.
I need to go. I'm going to go next year.
So you see there is a small symbol here. Yeah. Great orcs.
Right there, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a hard time getting in there. So
You have wargs and all the other troops.
so it's 7 times as big and more crowded.
Wood elf archers. Yeah. Yep.
This is sailing, right?
And wood elf spearmen. Okay. So there are several different characteristics that a unit has in this game. First of all, each unit may have a combat strength of either 1 or 2. So 2 is very powerful, and only the dwarf veterans and the great orcs have them. So essentially, combat strength determines how many combat dice you roll in the game. So you normally it's 1 for each unit, but some units have 2 dice. And then you have a favorite terrain, like mountain or plains or swamp. Yes, matching the icons on the board. Favorite terrains is also important because at the beginning of a battle, you compare the number of troops in both armies that are fighting and their favorite terrains. Whoever has the most troops who are fighting in their favorite terrain has terrain supremacy, and this means that he gets 1 bonus card draw, of course granting if he wants
So
immediately
some sort of battle effect that they can
bonus
sure.
in that battle. And last but not least, each troop has a specific ability that can be used in the battle. This is also a very nice mechanic because normally you see there are 2 colors of combat dice in the game, the white and the black. Normally you just roll the white dice, but if you in a combat round you create a hand of cards based on the troops that you have in the battle, plus you take the regroup card, plus any card, event card that you have in your hand. Okay, so you see all of them, of course, are the same back. So you create a hand like this at the beginning of a round of combat or battle. Then at the beginning of each round of combat, you can play one of these cards. So you can either play one normal combat effect, just like you do in War of the Ring, or you can play the combat ability of a troop. If you play the combat ability of a troop, you replace a number of white dice with the same number of black dice as the number of units that you have in the battle.
Okay.
So for example, I play dwarf veterans, I have 2 dwarf veterans in the battle, I will replace 2 dice with black. Then when you roll to hit, any dice which is a black die which hits also activate the special ability of that kind of troop. So this creates an interesting situation because you can have one army which is focused on one kind of troop, which means that it will be very easy to activate that troop's ability, but you only have that ability, and you can only reuse the ability by playing a regroup action. So essentially you will use the ability once, then you have to regroup, then you can use the ability once again. While if you have a more flexible army with multiple type of troops, then you have multiple abilities in your hand.
Maybe not quite as strong, but you can do it a lot more often, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So this is a there are other mechanics in combat which makes it a little bit more detailed and more tactical than in War of the Ring, but essentially the special abilities of the units are the biggest departure in terms of how the gameplay at the battle level.
It seems like another interesting difference compared to War of the Ring is in this one it seems like the shadow player is more fighting a clock as opposed to the other one.
Yes,
so
it's a sort of some of the
Kinda flips it a
elements
bit.
of War of the Ring
Yeah.
are almost the opposite. Yes, and also another thing which we tried to make a departure from War of the Ring from is the playing time. We really tried hard to make sure that the game could be played in quite less time than War of the Ring is, because we heard from a lot of people, okay,
Sure.
I like that game so much, but I don't have time enough.
Right.
And so both in setup time, the setup is very
Much
quite
faster, yeah.
faster. Yes, 5 minutes in setup, and also in the overall amount of time. This is a game that once you are familiar with the game, you can play 60 to 90 minutes
wow.
easily. And so in one evening, you can easily fight 2 games, swap sides. So
Very
it's
cool. So you still have some of the
definitely
interesting combat mechanics of hand management and things like that, but
Yeah.
in a much more compact experience.
fast. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Great. And is this available now?
Available now here at Gen Con. It's a pre-release here, and in stores in the first week of September.
First week of September. Great. And this has been a preview of the Battle of the Five Armies. Thank you very much.